Welcome back, everybody. We're here with Roger James today. We're going to hear
guys.
about his life, and we're going to learn about where it all started, which for me, I think was, we went to school back in grade school together, but we didn't really know each other back then.
Yeah, I guess technically that's where it started, which we didn't realize till recently. But the journey for me started when I had to find my first realtor. And so that was Jordan. Just knew that I wanted to do some, I guess if we rewind a little bit, really it started, I think where it started for a lot of people, which was having a rich dad and a poor dad. So Robert Kiyosaki, I'm sure.
Yep, the book.
Yeah. And that put me on a path of wanting to invest. And I didn't know anyone who was doing that. There wasn't a large social media presence.
Like there is now.
Like there is now. You can connect with people and find all kinds of content online. So I reached out to a friend of mine who had Jordan as his realtor, and we had some conversations and looked at some good properties, and kind of, again, I really didn't know what I was doing. So it was a great place to start, and we found a really solid investment property, and going through the motions of that, with your help, was really what solidified, and I was hooked at that point. That was it.
So when you think back to high school, heading into the early life, so when you're leaving the protections of school every day and getting yourself ready to jump into the real world. What was, when you look back, when you started that out, what did you walk through early part to then get to the part where you're investing? Like how early in that process did you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, get your mindset around investing and start to build?
Yeah, so that was probably finish high school, start getting out into the workplace and looking at what career jobs look like. I was in the tool and die industry, and realized that I didn't love the idea of working for somebody else, and I wanted to just have a plan B, something else, something that allowed me to, if I did want to work for somebody else, that I was doing it because I wanted to. I loved the work. And it actually, I guess, to some degree, watching HGTV and people flipping houses sparked a bit of an interest. And I don't even know how Rich Dad, Poor Dad came about at that point, but really helped me understand money. I think that's an important piece of that is understanding money and how it works, and how to use it to your advantage. And that really, you can look at, any opportunity as an investment from that perspective. And that started, that was probably early 20s, maybe 20, 21, 22, when that started, yeah.
So when you go, so 21, 22, you're starting to work, you're starting to build an income, you're looking at, so I know I don't want to work for somebody for the rest of my life.
Yes.
I would love to be in a position where one day I can just put my head down and the money's coming in.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, and so in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the biggest thing is what is an asset, right? Like that's, when I look back, that's the part that really got me. And it's like, because you always think your primary residence is an asset, and the way he terms it is anything that generates an income.
Right.
Meaning it has to actually produce something, otherwise it's a liability.
Right.
Which culture shifts your mind, at least from how I grew up. Like when you think back to the money talks you had with your family and friends when you were young to maybe the money talks you're having with your family now. Again, where when you look at that early lessons you're learning in money and real estate, how do you apply that now?
Well, so it's interesting because up to that point growing up, the goal, if ever, was to buy a house to live in, and then get it paid off.
Right.
That's the goal. And get a good education, work hard, all of that, make sure you have good grades. There was a huge focus when I was young to make sure that my grades were where they need to be. Again, post Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it was very different. It was very, there's nothing wrong with buying a house and even paying it down, but you want to be able to add value to it. You want to be able to use equity from it and grow a portfolio of properties off of that. Use it to your advantage,
Right.
opposed to just owning it, paying it off, and being comfortable there, which I think is a great secondary option. Paying it, have it being debt free on your principal residence is great, but using that to your advantage is amazing as well. And so like it was a tough lesson to learn, because all through growing up it was very much safe and pay it off. And so it was interesting to hear a different perspective. That's not something I'd ever heard before Rich Dad Poor Dad.
So you think of perspective. I love that word, because I think one of the hardest things is we have the way we're raised, we have our idiosyncrasies about how we think about things that we never really question.
Yeah.
Till we gain a perspective.
Yeah.
In your life, when you look at the perspective, so you see that as one of those changes. Are there other areas of your life that have created perspective, things that you've gone through that you're like, man, I'm so grateful, even though maybe at the time, like you said, you're changing your mindset, you're changing how you think about life, and you're saying to yourself, okay, it's worth it, but man, or the lesson if it could have been earlier, right? Or
yes.
If you're looking at those things, what are some of the perspectives you would, want to talk about?
There's been a few. So there's been things as small as, so like early on, so 15, I got my first car, which was a '79 Camaro, and but it was not
the classics.
Yeah, but it wasn't a full car. It was like pieces of a car.
Okay.
And so it was a good experience, in the sense of I had to take this thing from pieces and I had to make it something to be able to use it. And when you're 15, 16, you want your freedom, you want to be out with your friends, and so I had to work on something physically and to get there. And so there was blood, sweat, and tears put into that, like literally. Mm-hmm. You smash your fingers with the wrench. I'm sure you know what that's like. And bringing life to it. So it's from something that's rolling to running and driving under its own power, and learning along the way. So from knowing nothing to being able to essentially build a whole car, from the age of about 15 to 17.
That's pre-YouTube.
Exactly. That's
impressive, really.
That's the old Hayes manuals to try to look through and the exploded view of the engine and everything, and that's trying to figure it out from that, and word of mouth. So you had to kind of find a community to get that done. So again, the lesson there is in using a community as a resource for just about anything that you want to do.
Yep.
And then the hard work of putting in to building this car so I can get to a place of driving it and enjoying it, and what that gives you. And so that has played a role throughout my life, but as well, when on the first flip that I did, there was I didn't know anything, and so I had to learn it all. I had to do it all. It took longer than expected. It cost more than expected, as it almost always does. Yep. And there was a lot learned in that as well. And previous to most of this, there's like a base layer of. So I played football in high school, which instilled a certain level of discipline. So when I got the car, which again was a big learning experience, I knew that I had to put my head down, do what needed to be done. And so there's a good base layer there. So there's a lot of levels to get to that point, and a lot of lessons along the way. But there's even still lessons today. You're
still learning.
Still learning. Things still happen, and but I think that's a good foundation. I think that's a good place for people to start. Yeah. Is in being able to see things through.
When you brought up the car, what's really funny is I bought an '86 Mustang was the first car I ever owned. It never did make it to the road while I owned it.
Yes.
I did all the work to the engine and fixed all of that. And then the issue was there was holes in the body.
Yeah.
So you had to be able to weld those.
Yeah.
That was not within the skill set of the 16,
different.
17-year-old version of myself.
Yeah.
So one of my dad's buddies ended up buying the car from me, and then it did make the road. He was able to do it and actually seal it all up, and it actually got on the road for a bit, which I thought was really cool.
But like the work that you did on that car, like how good did you feel about that?
Yeah. Well,
after the stuff that you did.
I just remember literally taking the part, I worked at the time at Canadian Tire, literally taking a part into the store and be like, I need one of these.
Yeah.
Like, no idea what the part is,
Yeah.
not a clue about, like, other than I knew where it came from, and I
Yeah.
understood, like, I looked at the engine, and again, you're dealing in 1986, so the engine was much more basic.
Yes.
You're dealing with a carburetor. It's not what you see today with fuel engine. Like, so I understood enough about it at the time,
Yeah.
but at the same time, when I went into the parts guy, just bring him apart, he's like, it's the 86 Mustang, and so they all knew but I didn't know what part I was holding most of the time.
Right.
So was it a pump? Was it the alternator? Was it different things? Like some of it I know now after experience. But yeah, it's very interesting to go back in time and realize, like you said, you start with something that's in the driveway. It's just a pile of crap, realistically, that you're working on to try to make it something. So again, we're all young, trying to get to our freedom. So I thought that was, I don't know if we've ever actually had that conversation before, but that's...
Yeah, not about that, but like in that, so this is what I like, this is what I love about doing real estate, and as a realtor specifically, is because that point in time, when I had my car and I was learning how to essentially build this car, and you had your Mustang, and you're like, okay, I need one of these. The real estate market is so complex that, this is what, for a lot of people, what we're dealing with every day is people that are at that stage when it comes to real estate.
Right.
And we get to be the people there helping them and guiding them. And the thing that I love the most about it is when you start off with a person, be it an investor, first-time home buyer, or someone that's owned a home before, and you see them at that part where they're essentially putting the part down, saying, like, what do I do? What do I do here? And then you work with them for a little while, and at the end of it, you're having conversations where they already know what that part is and what to do with it. And just watching people evolve in that is one of the things that I love about what we do. It's really cool.
So when you think about educating or providing that value to people, like so as a realtor, as a businessman, what's your answer to someone who says, hey Roger, how did you do that? Do you just say, sorry, that's my secret? Or how do you respond to the people who would want to know, how did you do it?
I love to share exactly how I did it.
Yep.
And to be fair, 9 times out of 10, there's things that even how I did it, there's mistakes that I made. So I love to share how I did it, how they can do it better, and where some of the resources are to learn and gain some of that. Because there's different, if we look at real estate, for example, on the investment side of things, there's a whole bunch of different niches you can get into. You can get into single family, multifamily, Airbnb, student rentals, warehouse space, parking spaces if you want to. You can blow it right up and you can do, just about anything. And so it's different for everybody. Certain things work better for certain other people. And I love being able to share exactly what I know about it. And I even have clients. I have some clients that, have done things that I've been able to help guide them through and be right next to them. And then we hit a curveball that we have to pivot, but we kind of have to learn that pivot together, and get so much from that. And so I can actually pull on my clients' experiences to help other people as well.
Right.
But I love being able to provide that information.
Well, that's the community. You brought that up earlier. You went, having a good community. So when you have investors, you have people, and you're stuck in a spot going, I haven't dealt with this recently. The phone is like, okay, so who?
Yeah.
Who are those who's that I know in my life that I can just tap that vein? Instead of being like, I'll figure it out myself. You're like, why would I do that when I know there's an answer probably in a couple of phone calls, and I can reach out to a few people and say, hey, can you help me? And the answer usually is, yeah, man, here, this is, or they don't have the person, but they know the next person, right? I think in life it's so interesting as we create relationships and we grow together. It's amazing what we know in part, but when you really consider what we know as a whole,
Yes.
right? Like,
It broadens things so much when you look at, you know, what your sphere knows, what you have access to, you know, the knowledge and resources that you have access to through the people that you know. And sometimes, and this is kind of speaks to the benefit of keeping in touch with people and having, you know, just conversations, right?
Right.
Because I've had instances where I've had clients that are, you know, I might have a client that it comes up in conversation. I had another client and they were doing, you know, epoxy flooring
Yep.
in you know, their garage or at a property, and I'll have someone that says, you know, oh yeah, you know, I do that, and it's just like, oh well, that's good to know. And you can now, you know, with having those conversations, you can put these people together.
Right.
And you know, you have, again, if you're working with good people, you know that a good client that I have that needs someone to do epoxy flooring, and another, you know, good client or at least person in my sphere that that I'm acquainted with, you know, they do good work, and you get to put these people together.
Yep.
And everybody wins.
So in your experience, do you find that basically if people need a resource, you're a great person to call because you usually do have the answer to where to find that person?
That's the thing,
Especially in real estate?
Yeah. So this is what I believe in, is that it's not necessarily about always having the answer, because I think anyone who really thinks they always have the answer, you know, could get things into a tough spot. But realizing that you may not always have the answer, but you are going to do your best to find it, and you've got resources of people to help get there. I think that's you know, the mark of a good person to know and be around.
The humility to know when to ask the right questions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the ability then to implement the information. I think when you look back to your earlier days, even if people told you sometimes the answer, were you always able to implement? Like when you had to struggle through, like sometimes you read the books, you hear the ideas, you can understand, call it intellectually, the information.
Yep.
But when you look back at some of your practical life lessons where you're like, okay, so I know intellectually this is true,
Yeah.
and then you go to engage it practically. Do you have any experiences there that, you know, from your past, your current, anything that, you know, would be helpful or beneficial to people who are like, man, I know this, I can't seem to get through it.
Yeah.
Like, I know I find myself there.
It's funny because I encounter that a lot with like new investors.
Okay.
And what I draw on and the examples that I bring up. So the first property that I did, there was the you know, Rich Dad Poor Dad that led up to that.
Right.
But there was a lot of you know, watching, you know, what would have been different things on TV, reading, you know, a bunch of other books, and there was like a period of like analysis paralysis where it was just like, I need more. I don't have enough information yet to feel comfortable to do this thing. But when I was able to get over that and pull the trigger on that property, and now, like, once you've signed the paperwork, it's yours. You're in it now. You can't, and I can't say that there wasn't a time doing a walkthrough where I wasn't just like, what did I get myself into? I don't know how to do any of this. What are we gonna do here? But the reality was the ink was dry, the paper was signed, and that is mine now. That's my commitment. And so you're forced to figure it out whether you like it or not. And in that scenario, it was like, okay, you know, I've got to do this thing, and you know, there's no turning back. You don't have the option, and so the doing of that, coming into a problem, figuring that problem out, solving it, and then realizing that, you know, when the next problem comes out, I can figure that out. I can solve that too. By the time you're done, you've got a finished property. Hopefully everything went well.
Right.
And so it's the action. The action is equally as important as the knowledge. And sometimes you can get further on just taking the action, because if your mind is open, you'll learn along the way.
So you would say that if you move into action, at least if you know you're wrong, you'll know sooner?
Absolutely. Like even
The mistake will present itself and you're like,
yeah, oh, there it is. Yes. Okay.
should do
So I
something.
won't do that again. But the reality is, again, if you're, if you do it the right way, you can afford to make some mistakes. You can afford to make some medium or larger mistakes, and as long as you learn from them, you set yourself up, to move forward. And if you have that willingness, you will get there. A lot of the people that I deal with, who are successful, are born mostly out of that principle.
So if I re-qualify a question, so in your mind, when you look at a young investor or you look at the youth today and you look at people that you're influencing, how would you say, okay, I know you're going to make some mistakes, right? We all know it's coming, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to make every right decision.
Right.
So what would you say to the people who would be in your shoes to help them move quicker out of the concept of that paralysis analysis, right? That moment where you're stuck. What would you give them advice to do so that they can move past that mentally, right? There's a situation where there's anxiety or there's emotions attached to that. So how do you move past the emotion to then, like you mentioned, action?
Yeah. I think for some people, so I think it's stronger in some people than others. I've met people that, it really wouldn't matter, what I say. It doesn't really feel like they're going to get there.
Okay.
And I think for that person, there's still a way, right? And because they need to show themselves that they can do it. And I think joint venture partnership is a good example, where you're taking on the risk with somebody else. So you're in it together, right? I think that's a good way to dip your toe in the water and maybe show yourself that you can do it. And then you won't need that on the next one. But I think we come back in a lot of ways to your sphere. If you've got people around you who are so knowledgeable is great, but if they're making moves and taking action, and you're in a room full of people and they're all doing stuff, right?
Yep.
It's going to make you want to do stuff.
Right.
And you're going to have the confidence, right? And you're going to hear the stories about what everyone's doing, and I think that's going to kind of ignite you.
So if you're stuck, go find somebody who isn't and maybe partner and just say, hey, I get, I'm going to be a bit of a drag off the hop. I might not know what I don't know, but I'd love to learn. I'd love to partner with you. How many investors do you know? They'd be like, nah, I don't want to spend time with you. Or how many people do you know who'd be like, okay, cool, yeah, jump on in. Here's how we'll make a deal this time. It's probably not going to be the most lucrative thing for you because if I'm going to take on the risk and teach you, but then you get to learn and you're learning from somebody who's already doing it. That JV statement, I think, is massive.
Yeah.
Just because you can't do it yourself doesn't mean you can't do it with somebody else.
Right.
Right.
And somebody's been there, right? Like anything you're looking to do, somebody's been there to do it already. And that's a great way to not only, again, get the confidence to do it because the person that you have, above you or that you're learning from has been there. So you're like, yeah, they know. If I don't know, they know. But it's a good way to curve a lot of those mistakes. Again, they're still going to happen, but you can curve around them. You can maybe grow a little bit faster that way. But there's one thing that I've always said, which was, growing up, it's always been like when it's time to pick a course for college, it's like, okay, what do you want to do? And you pretty much get, one good run at it because post-secondary education isn't cheap.
Right.
And so you got to, out of a book, pick a course that you want to take that you're going to, at the very least, make a good run at, if not make the career, your career for the remainder of your time. And I feel like I wish at that age that I had shadowed some people. And maybe try, shadow. I mean, if you want to be a doctor, shadow a doctor. You want to be a police officer, go for a ride along and shadow some people in different areas to see where you might want to do it, because that's one of those things, again, in life as well as in real estate or investing, it's going to curve things for you a lot and get you a lot further, a little bit faster. And I feel like I probably would have found real estate as a realtor at a younger age if I had gone that route.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, so again, you started out as an investor. I got the privilege to be your first realtor. But when you go back to that state in time, you weren't a realtor yet.
Right.
And even though you saw what realtors were doing, you're saying like co-ops, right? So we have co-ops in school so people can go to certain jobs and test out whether they enjoy that thing. Now you are a realtor.
Yeah.
But you are an investor. Is it the job you thought when I was doing it? When you first met me and I was doing the real estate job.
Yes.
And now you are.
Yep.
When you look at that from any perspective, what would be the things that you didn't know or that like you were like, oh, that's all real estate is,
Yeah.
and then came to real estate to be like, no, here's the truth. And like you think about doctors, right? Like there's you diagnose the patient, but there's also the dealing with all the blood and all of the death and the other things that come with that job that people don't always remember. You always think about the good side of the job, but not always the bad side. So going back to that, if you can rewind in your mind to the days when you were working with the realtor, to the day you became a realtor, and what would you think so different about it?
Yeah, I actually remember that time specifically, and there was, I thought, so if we can, rewind just a little bit, the benefit there, the reason that I even explored real estate was, as someone who was out looking for investment properties, I'm out with my realtor.
Right.
And when we're out looking at properties, and I'm doing this after work or on a weekend from my regular job, and I'm having more fun doing this than obviously than my work, right?
Right.
And so at that time, my mentality was, if I can make this my job, this is what I'm doing every day. This is amazing. I love doing this.
Right.
I'd love to do this all day long. And so that's what kind of sparked that conversation. And then with that, there was a perception that like, essentially what I was seeing was what being a realtor was.
Right.
The reality is that
it's not just showing houses?
Apparently not. There's a whole bunch of like behind the scenes stuff, which I knew there was going to be a level of that, which in my mind amounted to mostly, paperwork and maybe taking calls, making calls, things like that. But realized, pretty quickly that like business doesn't just come in. You have to find it or make it happen. Yeah. And that's a whole aspect of being a realtor that I didn't have, laid out in front of me. I had everything else, I had, showing houses, looking at properties, analyzing investments, things like that covered. Bringing business in, advertising, doing an open house, things like that. Didn't have that aspect. So I had to learn that, that side of things. And it was different. It was different than I thought it was going to be. But I think it paired well and ended up enjoying a lot of that as well. It allows you to bring some, as you know, with everything that you do, it allows you to bring some creativity out in bringing yourself and putting yourself out there. And when I was focused mostly on the show a house, sell a house, go look at homes, like that's being a realtor, but there's so much more to it.
So if you look at that from the perspective of real estate, how did you look at that with marriage? How did you look at that with becoming like when you look at the same kind of things in life, we have perspectives. We watch things in like when you did the car, right? You understood the engine in the sense that the car that made the car go somewhere, but like these weird pieces that you don't fully grasp till you're living them.
Yeah.
That you don't fully understand until you're standing there and you're like, oh, this is what this truly is.
Well, real estate was a big like eye opener for that. As far as marriage, my wife and I had been together since high school, so long enough that marriage really didn't change much for us.
No surprises?
No real surprises there.
Not that he's going to talk about it anyway.
Everything we pretty much knew what we were getting into there. I will say that having my daughter. You always, there's no surprise, but like the lengths that you're willing to go for your child, really become evident. Like everyone wants the best for their kids, right? Of course. And that's like an easy statement to make, and we all know this. But having somebody in the world that you would do just about anything for like a child is like a whole different thing. So that was something, the level of that was certainly, unexpected. But there's so many things. It's like when you bring up the car, right? The car is something, there's a pile of parts there. I know I got to get it together. I don't know how or what it entails. And sometimes it's shocking, and sometimes shocking in a pleasant way. So I had another car, which was well after the Camaro, and I bought it knowing it had a transmission issue, and having a pretty good idea of what the issue was. But engine, not an issue. Bodywork, anything like that, not a problem for me. Transmissions are like a whole different world on their own. It's a different thing. You're getting into a transmission. It's not something that I had done before, and so
new adventure.
Yeah, it was a new adventure. Again, I had already been into cars. I had done quite a few builds at this point. I knew pretty much what I was getting into, except for when it came to transmission problems. So I bought this car. I had the part that it needed, and the car, and took the transmission apart while it was in the car, took the transmission pan down, got the new part, which was, I believe it was a regulator valve, something in the transmission, and put what I needed in, put it together, and turned the car on, and it went from a car that didn't move to a car that moves and runs well. And that was one of those, I didn't know what I was getting into, but that worked out a lot better and a lot easier than I thought. So sometimes the surprises are good.
So the solution was what you expected to some extent, but you almost assumed there would be more to it.
I thought it was going to be way more difficult. It was a transmission, which again was a foreign thing to me at the time, and it was ended up being a lot simpler than I thought. And you'll run into those too in just about everything.
Right.
There are certainly things in real estate or doing a property. It's the same deal, right? You think it's going to be more difficult, and sometimes the hard part is that's the thing that keeps someone from taking that next step. Right. Is their perception of how difficult that thing might be, and then oftentimes you'll get there and realize that wasn't so bad.
Yeah, the infamous pessimist in the back of the brain going, oh, you're going to run into these 1,000 problems. Yeah. The trick I've learned is to actually ask a question to the thing, what is most likely?
Sure.
So we can look at the negatives. As human beings, we hear more no than we ever do yes. We hear more criticism than we get praise.
Yeah.
And it's not because everyone's wandering around being like, how do I criticize another human? It's about what the issue is we see error, we correct it, right? The teacher who writes every problem on the board and yet the last one gets it wrong. So he wrote all the other ones right, but the only one anyone says anything about is when he did it wrong.
Right.
And it's the word picture, right? It's this story. So in your life, like you were talking about creativity, you're talking about problem solving and all those things. Like what would be one of the most inspirational, like, man, like you said, the car moved, right? Like, that's amazing. But when you look at the creativity or problem solving in your life, where would be some arenas or things a story that would really stand out?
Well, that's a tough one because, there's a lot of little problems that end up, being solved and they feel good. I think, so I mean, I guess one of the more impactful ones, if I go back even further, is so when I started playing football in high school, I didn't play football, and then someone in my class was, I had someone in class was like, "Hey, are you going for the football team?" And I was like, "I don't think so. No, not really." "Oh, you should do it, man. You'd be great. You should do it." I was like, he's like, "No, it's okay. You'll make the team. Everything's good. You should just do it." It's like, "I don't have a ride home. I'll give you, my dad will give you a ride home after. Don't worry about it." So, go out and for the tryouts and we run a route, and was like the first time, doing it on a field with, other people trying to kill me at the same time. And it went well, and I had fun. And it was one of those things that, okay, I like this, right? I'm going to show up again tomorrow. And show up again tomorrow, and then it got to be one of these things where I really started to like it. So then I started to wanting to work at it and be better at, my position, main position at the time was wide receiver. Wanted to be better at being a wide receiver, and what that turned into through hard work, practices. Like we worked hard. It takes a toll on your body. You're in the gym. There's things like that. And our team ended up going undefeated for 4 years in a row, and won OFSA, all four of those years, and back to back. And so it was difficult. It was hard work. It was constant working in the off season, but the end result of that again was just it shows you what can be accomplished. And so that started like a baseline for work hard at something and you can achieve what you're looking to achieve.
Hard work pays off.
Hard work pays off, and even further, again, the same group of guys, which again, this is going back over 20 years to high school. The same guys that I had was on the team with, if I called any of them today, which some of them haven't spoken to since then,
right,
would have my back. And so again, building that solid community, right? And so that was probably at the time for me, from someone who never played, didn't really watch football, to being on a championship team. And the work it took to get there was a challenge, and at a fairly young age, there was a lot to learn in that.
And you didn't do it alone.
Exactly, I didn't do it alone. Yeah.
It's always very interesting, especially in sports, unless you're in a solo sport, right? Golf.
Sure.
Then you seem to not have friends who make fun of you, and you make a bad shot, so you make another bad shot. But when you have a community of people, you also didn't just play for yourself.
Right.
Like, I think in life, one of the things I've learned, the principle of managing expectations, but also that hard work for others to support them and to help them really supports you. It's interesting how serving others serves yourself.
Yeah.
So when you look at your family, you look at being a part of the real estate team, you look at the whole of the clients and everything, and in that mindset of serving others, is there a time where you look back and you go, man, I wish I had served instead of taken? Like, is like moments where instead of doing the thing to benefit others, you've more tried to benefit yourself? And do you have any stories around that, or have you just sort of had these experiences of the other side? Like, how has that worked out in your life?
I've always really wanted to. There's really few times where I think of myself over other people. Mm-hmm. And so specifically as an adult, I've always just wanted to help people. Mm-hmm. And again, with what I do now as a realtor, it's just a great place to really help people. It's a big purchase across the board, right? Yep. And so it's a great place to do that. I'd say more so over anything, in doing so, I've helped people oftentimes to my own detriment, and that that has just kind of solidified. But I say that in a way to say that, like, to my own detriment maybe at that time, mm-hmm. but it has always then benefited me on the back end. Right. So there's always been a benefit to myself just by doing that. Now, to be fair, I don't do that for the benefit, but the benefit usually comes, right? And so I've never been the person to come from a place of, trying to benefit myself first. So I really don't have those experiences, but I can imagine, I've encountered people that, that do that more on a regular basis. And, sometimes they do well, but there's oftentimes struggles that come with that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as you walk through life, the relationships, the communities, the people. It's interesting because a lot of we back to school, right? Get the job, do these right things. What we don't realize is at the end of it, it's all the people that are in your life that will get you through life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you look at the people in your life, is there anybody that you look up to or have looked up to in your life that are is there a person, the coach who coached the football team, or your spouse and how she supports you in your life, or business partners, or different people that you would point to, so as mentors or teachers or things? Like, what What would be those, if you're looking back just as a quick snapshot over the past almost, 40 years? I know it's not there yet. You're a little bit behind me, but
quite.
Not quite. We're not there.
Quite.
I approach there shortly. But when you're looking back, like if you're talking to some young people or even just people looking to get in, you talked about those communities. What would be a person or a quality that would really stand out? So if you're looking at the person and then that quality, that if somebody out there is saying, hey, what would I want to look for in that person? What do I want to see in them? What would you say to them?
I would say, to be quite honest, I would say it's different things in different people.
Sure.
So, everyone has their flaws. And we've talked about this. Everyone has their flaws, but everyone has some really great qualities as well. It really doesn't matter who you are. Everyone has at least a few things that are really great about them.
Some part of them.
Something's good in there somewhere.
100%.
And so I find like on our team, for example, there are times when I in a situation, maybe it's negotiations or wherever, I'm not necessarily, my personality is maybe not necessarily the one to handle that, in my eyes, the best. So I might pull from Darren, right? I might pull Darren and handle that, what would Darren do, right?
Yep.
Like that kind of scenario.
Yep.
And handle it that way. Or what would Isaac do? What would George, and so in that sense, there's been, a lot of people that I've looked up to for different reasons,
Sure.
right? And so again, a football coach, John Bloomfield, he was someone that was very driven, and he instilled that in us, as players, and so that was at an early age something to look up to. I don't think I had seen someone who was working so hard at something. Like for us, it was playing football at the time.
Right.
You got school to worry about, you have other things, but for him it was something else, right? It was achieving this unachievable thing and his drive to do that. So that was certainly something to look up to then. And then I think I've also had the benefit. So my wife and I have been together so long that, as I'd mentioned, since high school, that like she's always been like my rock, like someone solid that I can lean on, and she's always there for me. So that gives me, the confidence to go out and do the things that I do, make the mistakes that I make, because when I come home, I have someone there that that supports me and has my back. So I think in a spouse you want that quality,
right?
And I think if you have that quality in that person at home, you can go out and do the things that that you need to do, for yourself and your family. But then at the same time, again, all these people that you have, that you're surrounding yourself with, they all have qualities that you can pull from. And I think it's important to identify what that might be in anybody, and learn from that piece of that person at the very least.
Take the best of them and leave the rest.
Kind of, yeah.
Hey,
exactly.
Again, we all have our failings. We know, and the benefit is knowing where they are.
Exactly.
If you know your weaknesses, then it allows the opportunity to find the people who match your strengths.
Yes.
So you have your strengths,
Yep.
they have their, I find in marriage a lot of times, I find it interesting because it's one of my strengths, and then I look at where my wife, I can pick up the slack, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And it's in that, I always find it amusing because, when I look at life through that lens, the comedy of marriage in some respect is because you put two very different people together, but somehow it works so well.
Yeah.
Because they complement.
Yes.
And so when you're in the complementary position, and then there's the other side, sometimes that shows up where you disagree, and it's no longer complementary, it's more correction.
But that's going to happen.
Correct.
That's okay.
Of
That
course.
happens. It happens.
Relationships.
All the time. Yeah.
But moving through them and persevering. So when you look at the perseverance factor in your life, that drive, that I'm just going to do it, I'm going to learn through it, I'm going to make the mistake, I've signed my name, I'm into this now, I'm going to make those choices. If you were going to, again, leave a piece of advice to everybody, what would you want to tell them from that would be like, okay, guys, here's this thing. If you just get this thing, this will make so many other things easier. Doesn't mean that this thing is easy.
Yeah.
It just makes things easier.
Yeah, I think it would be the biggest, the one piece that I can think of that, in just about anything, someone I can't recall who it was, but someone said, open as many doors as you can. Walk through the doors that are open for you, and close the ones that are not. Like forget about the ones that aren't. And so it's like, take opportunities, when they present themselves, and to some degree, if you don't feel you're prepared for it, it's going to be okay. Like that, I think, can get somebody so far in essentially action. Comes down to taking action. So many people, again, are reluctant to do that, and regardless of what it is, right? If it's your personal life, and there's someone that you like, and you're kind of nervous, don't really want to ask them out. It's like, just get over there, get in front of them, and say the words, and let the rest just happen, right? And I think you'll find that a whole world can open up for you.
Say the words.
And
I like
just doing it, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes that's what it's about.
So just say the words and let the chips fall where they may.
Say the words at the end of the day. I think that'll get you so many places that you couldn't have imagined.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you were to speak to everybody about where they can find you, what would you? Where can people find Monsieur Roger James?
The best way, if you want to get a hold of me, just shoot me a text, give me a call. You can reach me at 519-991-3135. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Thank you so much, Roger.
Thanks for having me on, dude.
Hey, it's been awesome.
Good chat.
And again, thanks everyone for jumping on again today to listen to the stories from Roger James, learning from his experience. We're so grateful to have you on the show.
Much love, guys. See ya.